Valentine's Day. I did not get any of you anything in keeping with tradition in the past. And I want you to know next year at this time I won't have anything for you either. But I will have good wishes, and heartfelt good wishes at that, which I think counts nicely on Valentine's Day in and of itself.
But heart-shaped good wishes.
Yeah. But if we brought something in for you, you'd accept it, would you not?
Well, who would not accept a gift?
But we didn't do it, Rob. We, too, were remiss.
Et tu, Billy?
At 2, yes.
Et tu, yes.
I proposed on Valentine's Day.
I did too. What year for you?
1984.
Mine was 1988 at the Lamont restaurant on top of Mount Washington in Pittsburgh. My wife to this day still has not said yes, but she did take the ring.
Same thing. She just kept saying, "Oh, John. Oh, John." She never said yes.
Odd.
I've proposed any number of things on Valentine's Day that didn't work out.
Mike, how about yourself? When did you propose to your wife?
I can't remember. I mean, my memory is fading big time.
Okay. Well, Bill, how about you?
We're in Miami. I cannot tell you the date. I can tell you the day of the week, and I can tell you the restaurant, and I can tell you her reaction.
She said yes.
She did, kind of like John. She said, are you serious? Are you sure? Bonnie, I'm joking.
How about you, Mr. Ken Mattson, via telephone?
2001, just before I got deployed after 9/11.
Well, that would be memorable. Yeah. You were down at the Pentagon for a while after 9/11, correct?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. And then how long were you down there?
Approximately 3 to 4 months. Then we got sent down to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
How long did you stay there?
Roughly, I would say 3 or 4 months, and then I got medical leave to donate a kidney to my father.
Oh, I never knew that about him. As long as I've known you, I did not know you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told him he would get one, so he's doing good.
Oh, that's good. That's you're a good son.
Our
Friday 5 includes Ken Mattson via telephone, Larry Schultz from Schultz, Harmon, and Jenkinson. Larry, good to see you here again.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
The Admiral Bill Stubblefield back from the first half hour.
A good interview with Kevin, I thought.
Mr. Michael Carr, longest tenured member of our crew, former tax commissioner of the great state of West Virginia.
Great to be here.
And New York Times best-selling author John Gilstrap.
Good morning.
And we have a lot to get to today with the Friday 5 with Mr. Ferretti out. His substitute, I guess you could say, would be Ken Mattson. And Ken, you hit leadoff in the Ferretti phone seat. Ready to go?
Sounds good. Ready to go.
Hit it.
So this seems to be a common thread with everyone, so I'll take the lead on it. Talk about Elon. So in 2008, Elon Musk supports Obama. In 2016, Elon Musk supports Hillary, stating her economic and environmental policies are the right ones. In the same interview in 2016 election, he stated that when Trump got elected, this is not the finest moment in our democracy. Trump is not the right guy. He just doesn't have the character that reflects well upon the United States. Then in 2020, supports Biden. Then Biden snubs Elon by not inviting Tesla to the electric car summit at the White House. Not long after that, Elon supports Trump and says voting for Trump is voting for Mars. So let's move to common day. Elon meets with China for a battery plant to be built in Shanghai. So much for America first. Elon and his group of 5 20-year-old gamer hackers gets a $6.5 million budget, which is increased to $14.4 million budgeted, to look in all these departments, computers, systems looking for waste, fraud, and abuse. You do not send hackers and coders with read and write access to look for the same. You hire accountants. An example is like the police. You call the police for a burglary and be surprised that the McDonald's employee shows up. I called you guys, not someone else. So, and one of these gentlemen has been nailed for industrial espionage and hacking for China. Elon shuts down the Consumer Protection Agency, whose mission is to look out for consumers, who is also looking into Elon's Tesla SpaceX issues. Then we have Gavin Cleaver, part of the crew, arrives at the IRS to begin examining its operations, looking to fire all the probationary agents who helped claw back $1 billion from millionaires' tax cheats. Then we have the Oval Office visit, where Musk said, I will say a lot of things that are incorrect and should be corrected. When you're in the Oval Office, no matter the party or person, you show respect to the office and wear a suit and tie. But you will notice Elon's lack of respect for Trump and the office in wearing a T-shirt and jacket and taking over the meeting as if he's the boss. And then lectures us on civics. We don't want unelected bureaucrats running the country. I hope you see the irony in that comment. Let's see. So Rob, it kind of reminded me when the whole time I was reminded of a scene in The Godfather where Michael Corleone is talking to his brother Fredo at the lake house. I was waiting for Trump to turn to Elon and state, I can handle things. I'm smart. Elon then meets across. Let's see. So, in ending, $50 billion and counting for NASA, $464 billion for Tesla bailout by Obama, $2.2 billion for Starlink. During this time, Tesla stocks fell 33%. Then Elon gets $400 million for armored Cybertrucks that are still having a hard time in 2 inches of snow. He wants all his company's investigations stopped. So the question is, an agency like DOGE should have accountants and should be writing up reports with facts to Congress. Why isn't Congress doing this? Whose job it truly is? Whose interest is Elon working for? Trump's, America, or his own? That's the question.
All right, I'm going to begin here with Mr. Gilstrap, a defender of the administration.
There's a lot to unpack there. I will accept at face value that everything you just said about all those details is right. You become the richest man in the world by having a lot of business interests in a lot of different places. And you can't just turn those off. And your fingerprints are going to be on a lot of contracts that are spread everywhere. Elon Musk has been brought in. I think he's proven himself to be fairly agnostic. From as you said yourself, he voted for Hillary, he voted for Obama, didn't like Trump, now likes Trump. I don't know if he's self-serving or not. I don't know the man. I can't read his mind. No one else can either. But I do think that it's interesting that among progressives there's this, and it's. I think we're going to see this a lot if just reading the proposed questions that people are going to talk about. There's a confirmation bias loop that the Trump haters, the progressives, pick your adjective, pick your noun, get caught in. And that is anything that looks like it might be improper automatically is, and it's for the worst possible reasons, and it's all about trying to ruin democracy as it currently exists. I don't buy into that. I think that there are a lot of actions that have been taken by Doge and others that are largely, and I'll get to this when it's my turn, that I think are largely appropriate. Courts are going to have to unpack a lot of this. And I think that's the point. I think that's why we're seeing so many EOs coming out so quickly. But I think it's a mistake, and I think it's unfair to try to assign malintent to actions that so far have proven only to be actions that are fairly agnostic and following the orders from the commander-in-chief.
Mr. Schultz.
Yeah. We're going to have to address through our court system whether those orders from the commander-in-chief are appropriate or not under our constitutional form of government with the division of powers that we enjoy. It's going to be interesting to watch. However, I don't care how nicely the person who's trying to sell me something acts. Obviously, if they act terribly, then the chance they're going to make a sale to me is pretty tiny. But if they act overly nicely, that's also going to reduce their chances of making the sale, because you're going to start to see the block of my trust erode before your very eyes. So when he comes to the White House in a T-shirt and a jacket that looked like a cross between a sport coat and a trench coat, I didn't understand that much, and gives his sort of disjointed ramblings about this stuff, he's not driving up his trustables number with me. And so I believe that until it's demonstrated clearly to me differently, that when Elon Musk does something, it is for Elon Musk. even if what he's doing is supporting Donald Trump, and that's only because he believes that that's a pathway to getting more money from his voters. I'm very troubled, as Ken said, by the idea that somebody who gets so much money handed to them by the federal government every year can possibly have a policy role on how the government spends its money. I don't know how I can make that any more clearly, but the $400 million just announced recently for armored cyber trucks that, as Ken points out, have a hard time moving around in a tiny amount of snow. My hammered 98 Tacoma would be a much better choice. The idea that he's getting $400 million of our tax dollars for that stuff puts him in a position where he should not be, and is not qualified to make judgments about saving me tax money. I don't trust his judgment.
Mr. Carl.
Well, I would refer to those same points and reach the exactly opposite conclusion. There is no doubt that I mean, if you're the beneficiary of $400 million of bad government, and you get up and attack the waste in government, then your credibility is skyrockets. So I think that Trump and bringing in Musk have done a great job for the first time, certainly in my adult lifetime, of challenging, and that means challenging both Republican and Democratic management of the government, and anybody who could so effectively raise questions about the waste and not necessarily corruption, but just simply the waste of government and the way it's structured and operates is a hero to me.
Admiral Stubblefield.
Yes, we're all traditionalists. We all like to look at something through the eyes where we have some comfort. And as Ken pointed out, I thought quite thoroughly, there's a lot of things about Elon Musk that it's easy to dislike, and if you dislike, it's easy to distrust. But Mike Carl, I thought, made a very telling point. We do have inefficiency in our government. Every election cycle, we hear the same thing. We have inefficiency, we're going to have to address it. And that repeats itself in the next election cycle, and the election cycle after that. The bottom line is we only nibble at the edges of addressing the inefficiencies. What Trump has chosen now is to take a more draconian, a much more deeply driven effort of trying to address the inefficiency. Is it right? I don't know. Time will tell if he's right. One thing it is doing is causing a phenomenal amount of disruption. Will the benefits justify the disruption? Will we put at risk some of our scientific research that has led the nation? Will we put at risk some of our world leadership of such as USAID program that nations call upon us? Will we be able to challenge effectively China's Belt and Road programs that have been getting more and more influence in third world countries than what we have? The NATO, the list goes on and on and on. I don't know the result of this. I wish I did. I do know, though, that what we've done in the past has not worked. If we're going to seriously address our inefficient government, well, at least try at it. And that, I think, is what Trump's doing now. I'm not a big supporter of Trump, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's trying something new and trying something different. He's not going to be 100% successful. If he's partially successful, that may be a step in the right direction.
I think if we're trying to save money, we've got two people at the head of this who have an awful lot of experience recently of not saving the taxpayer money. Okay? Donald Trump. Let's start there. I'll throw out Trump University. You can look up Trump University on your own. I'll throw out the bankruptcies. I'll throw out Atlantic City. Okay? You can look that up on your own. Let's look at the Super Bowl. First president ever to go to a Super Bowl. Do you know why no other presidents have gone to the Super Bowls? It's expensive. It's a logistical nightmare. Estimated costs for him to go to the Super Bowl are as high as $20 million. Now, who paid for that? Did Elon make a private donation to pay for that? No. That gets billed to the taxpayer. So I'm fascinated by, we're going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse so long as it pertains to you. But if it pertains to me, I'm above that. $20 million to go to the Super Bowl. Why? Because he said, I think it's important that the American citizens see their president at the Super Bowl. It's a sign of strength. We had a military fly over a domed stadium. What'd that cost? Right? Military fly over a domed stadium. Think about that for a second. You could see that on the big screen. But it flew over a domed stadium. So let's save some money, but I'm going to spend $20 million of taxpayer money to go to the Super Bowl. Now let's look at Elon Musk, right? Besides Ken's setup there. Elon's been railing about wasted taxpayer dollars that he's finding every day by sending his 19-year-olds, some who may have classified clearance, some who may not, into an office, not going to the head of the office or the underlings and saying, we want to look at some inefficiencies here. Can you show us where some inefficiencies are? They just take over the computer system, right? Elon sent out, or his 19-year-olds, to 2 million federal employees an email saying, resign, you get paid till the end of September. So we're going to pay people 8 months' salary to not work. How does that save taxpayer dollars? Tell me that one. Elon he used an illegal server, by the way, didn't have clearance. Lord knows how many viruses are going around from that to 2 million federal employees. That's been linked to a few things. And this is the guy that we're going to allow technical access with his crew to all the federal records that we have right now. Okay? But let's throw that out too. Elon is in an electric vehicle industry. Now, if you buy an electric vehicle, guess what you get? You qualify for a tax credit of $7,500, and all of his vehicles are under that umbrella. You may not, because of your income, get the full credit, but you're eligible for it, $7,500. He has sold 6.75 million vehicles. What's that come to, about $5 billion? Now, truth be known, I don't know if that's worldwide or just domestically, but maybe half of them are domestic. So let's assume that half the people that bought those vehicles got a tax credit. That's tax dollars that didn't go into the Treasury. It came out as a tax credit. Well, if we're saving people's tax dollars, and you're in an industry where you have profited and boosted sales because your industry is subsidized by the taxpayers, where's the shared pain on that one? Huh? Are we saving tax dollars when it's convenient for you, or are we saving tax dollars and spreading it over everybody? Because if the people at the top are blowing taxpayer dollars, then who are you to lecture me about saving taxpayer dollars? Because you're blowing them yourself.
The effort, the cost of the effort that he's engaged in, and the cost of it, not to him, but to the government, is less than minuscule compared to the decades of waste that he's fighting.
I don't even know what that has to do with what I just said.
But when does Elon Musk attack? There was a suggestion earlier in this show that's not true, that somehow Elon Musk is also attacking the free money that's coming to him. No, it ain't. No, he's not. He's not saying, let's get rid of that tax credit that boosts my sales. He's not saying, let's make sure the guy who's lecturing to us about government waste doesn't have a $400 million interest in a contract with the Department of Defense. They're not cutting that. They're not talking about that as waste, fraud, and abuse.
No, he's talking about what's traditional, multi-decades waste, fraud, and abuse.
Right,
That's what
and
he's
he
talking
wants
about.
to be able to
Let's
double
cut
it
it
to
off.
$800 million and then $8 billion from the government. They're not going to save any money in the
It's
end at all.
It's multi-trillions that are at issue.
Do you hear there's fallacious reasoning here that's driving me crazy? First of all, we're 3 weeks into the new administration. So as far as he hadn't gotten to Defense Department yet. So he's announced that he's going there. He hasn't gotten there.
How
Give
much
him
you want to
time.
bet he never touches his
You know,
own money?
This is
How much
the
you wanna
thing.
bet?
I'm not. There's the presumption of the worst, and if Rob, all respect, arguments like the ones you make just invite this loop of whataboutism. Yeah, well, what about when Biden or Nancy Pelosi, or it's just the president gets to go where the president wants to go. He is the president of the United States. He did get a massive ovation from at the Super Bowl.
There are many who claim that was partially piped in by Fox.
There are many who are claiming everything that is possibly wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So choose to believe what you want to believe,
Which is where we all are.
But this is nitpickery of the nth degree. 3 weeks into the administration,
John,
This is lived by example, is what it is, John. It's lived by example.
there's some speculation what we'll do in DOD, admittedly so. There's no speculation USAID. There's no speculation with NIH cutting the overhead in charge. There's no speculation in getting rid of the IG, getting rid of most of those. There's a lot of things at this point in time
Yes.
that's past the speculation stage.
I would agree, and we haven't discussed any of that.
Yes, we have in part. I've mentioned a couple of them.
Right, and USAID is its own animal. It was a money pit for a lot of progressive causes, billions of dollars of money that was set into their a vault to be released later.
That's putting the good intent of USAID in nothing but political terms, John. And I think
an agency has no intent. An agency is a thing. It's a block of bureaucracy. The intent comes from the leadership and the execution of the plans over time. I have nothing against the Agency of International Development. I mean,
but the USAID, the premise of USAID was built by Congress. The guidelines of USAID was built by Congress. It was not some wild-eyed bureaucrat making their own decisions.
Hey, by the way, we got to get back to Ken because, Ken, you have a minute and a half to close it up.
Yes. That's a lot out. This is for discussion, but I'm going to close it. Look at the Doge website. All right. There's no evidence of what they found there. None. So my thing is, if you're finding all this stuff, you show the evidence on your website. Not just come to the camera and state what you supposedly found, and then you say, well, most of the things I'm going to say is incorrect. It's up for you to correct me. Come before Congress with all your facts, with all your people, and you tell them, Republicans and Democrats, from both Democrats and Republican administrations, what they voted for, what they put in funding bills. Because we're all missing this, right? We're all keen on this stuff. It's those people that sit at those little committee chairs behind asking questions. It's their fault. And the attention is off of them.
That it?
And in regards to USDA, well, I'd rather have a box that says from the people of the United States with soft power than from the Republic peoples of China. So,
Ken, good job on the leadoff. It got the group involved in the discussion. And Mr. Stubblefield and Mr. Gilstrap, you're on the clock next. Ken Mattson, he's in the Joe Ferretti seat. Ken, good morning.
good morning.
Appreciate the substitution work. Also in studio by Mr. Lawrence Schultz,
Good morning.
attorney at law. Mr. Michael Carl, attorney at law.
Good morning.
Mr. John Gilstrap, not an attorney,
no,
but he's written about some in his books.
I have. It doesn't usually go well for them.
Doesn't go well for anybody in your book except your hero. Everybody else gets squashed like a bug.
Well, that's not so odd as it seems, because when we lawyers write about other lawyers, it's never good either. And we don't write about ourselves. They never ask you for an autobiography in the court.
You know they should. They really should. And of course, we welcome back the Admiral Bill Stubblefield, who is on the clock with issue number 2.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the governor's state of the state speech. But first, going back very quickly to Ken, I thought this topic was very good. A lot of good opinions. The 2 areas that were not treated at all, I think, was the transparency issue that came in this the press conference, and also the favored treatment, which Musk may or may not be receiving. But that's for another day. The state of the speech last Wednesday, I was struck with a couple of things. One, how little coverage it got after the fact. Rob, you talked about it quite a bit yesterday. More information came out from your show than I saw on Metro News or saw anywhere else. Now, could be argued that I'm watching the wrong news sets. I don't know, but there's not as much information as I thought would be coming from the State of the State speech, especially the fact it was his first one. My overall impression of the speech, and I'm going to ask others to chime in a couple of minutes, was it was more of a feel-good speech than it was a speech of substance. Marcy was clearly looking for applause line. And he's not yet adept at engaging his audience. There were several breaks in midstream waiting for applause, and then the audience did respond in time, but it was not the spontaneous applause that we've come to expect. Again, I thought it was an intent to feel good. The result was there was, in my view, less substance than what I was anticipating. There were some surprises, and some very favorable surprises. One, for the first time that I can remember, the universities in the Eastern Panhandle were used in the same breath as WVU and Marshall, and that was the West Virginia Power Technical Center, which is going to be an intersection between energy and technology. Shepherd and Blue Ridge were included in that group of folks. One of the things that I'm surprised about, and it's not only the speech but subsequent as well, and that is what is the condition of our budget. Marcy mentioned that in fiscal year 25 we're going to be $400 million in the red. Well, we've been hearing this quite a bit recently, but where the governor carried the next step farther was in 26, going to be $500 million, 27 and beyond, $550 million, and as far as you can look out. He's made a big point of this, yet Mike Hornby yesterday on radio said, we're not really in debt. It's not a big thing. We heard Roger Hanshaw say that. We heard Eric Tarr say the same thing. We've heard Randy Smith, the new president of the Senate, say we don't really have a budget problem. Who do we believe? We don't go into a new administration with doubts of one group saying we have a budget problem, a fiscal problem, and the other side saying, no, we don't really have a fiscal problem. I came away with a big question mark with that issue alone. Who do I believe? I want to have faith in my elected officials. If I'm hearing two different projections, one doom and gloom, and the other one we don't have a problem, it makes me sit back and say, what do I believe? He mentioned there's going to be institute a 2% spending reduction among the agencies. He did not say across the board among the agencies. Admittedly, he did not go in great detail with this, but that raised a red flag. Just how is he going to address that? He's going to improve workforce participation, but yet he made no mention at all how he was going to do that. To me, that is kind of a throwaway statement. That's something we need to do, improve workforce participation. But the real key to that is how's it done. He mentioned consolidation of agencies. He's going to revise the school aid formula. He's going to invoke a partnership with the federal government to increase funding, broadband, expanding vocational tech, and the like. if I read the tea leaves, there's going to be the federal spigot is going to be tightened. That's going to flow downstream to the feds, to the state government. The state government's going to have to find ways to find additional funding, and hopefully a more meaningful partnership with the federal government will be one way. I'll be curious to see how he does that. I was disappointed in the fact that he came out very much certificate of need in health care. He's going to be lobbying very strongly against certificate of need. I noticed watching when he mentioned that about half the audience legislators clapped, the other half did not clap. How that plays out is going to be interesting. And then the PEIA, something that we know a lot of, that we got to address. He mentioned an infusion of $45 million, but that's as far as he went. Not providing specific or long-term solutions. I've given you my synopsis of the speech, both the good and the bad. Again, I was surprised not more coverage than I saw, except for what, Rob, you presented yesterday. Be curious to see the reaction of my colleagues to the speech. Did you think it was a good speech? Did you think it mediocre speech? Or did you think a speech of little substance?
Mr. Mattson.
I think the speech was kind of in the middle. I think I agree with Bill. It was more of a clappy, red meat type of thing. And I know there was one guy, and the name forgets, I can't get, where he sat down like your mean uncle staring at you with his arms crossed.
That was Vernon Chris, the finance chair.
Yeah. Yeah. So he wasn't too happy about what was being said. And, we'll see. I think the PAIA, I agree with Mike Height and a few others that discussed this. We should get out of PAIA. Maybe fund it for another year, but they have to find another way of relieving West Virginia of that. But really, what kind of got me was the religious stuff when he went on is, I get it. I mean, faith moves us in many ways in our life, but whose faith, right? So, what part of the Bible are you using to judge your bills for the community, right? So, I just think there's a lot of red meat in there. We'll see. I don't know if, you know how I am. I'm always distrustful of government, and we'll question everything. And is this $400 million a thing for the administration to say, hey, I fixed it, look at me? Or do we go by what Mike Hornby said, we're all cool, we're fine, there's nothing to see here? So who do I believe, right? And it leaves that doubt into a person like me and others. Well, who am I supposed to believe? The people that say trust us, or the governor who made all these promises and has a record on things? I get kind of I'm wishy-washy. I'm on it in regards to the middle of the road, and we'll see what happens. We just got to keep our delegates and senators to task.
Mr. Gilstrap.
I'm going to agree with Ken. I get very nervous whenever the governor gets to set the revenue projections for the state, really with no input from anybody else. That's a license to just cook the books, and I don't mean that in a criminal way, but it's a way to shape the projections in a way to set oneself up to be a hero. And the $400 million deficit, I don't know. It's never been explained. That's the thing. We know that 156 million of it comes from Medicaid expenses, and 60 odd million comes from PEIA. Those are the big ones. And I don't really understand that either, to be honest with you. But it feels to me like he's teeing up a political miracle that he can claim to be his own, and it also justifies cutting back on the expenses and the operating expenses of the government. It's a way to justify the 2%, not across the board, but across agencies cuts. As far as the speech is concerned, State of the State speeches are not policy dumps anyway. They never have been. They're supposed to be rallying cries. And I think Governor Morrissey, he better, from the snippets I saw, it's much better than his acceptance speech in terms of rallying the crowd. But, it's just, that's he's got to grow into that position. I don't know what to make of the speech. I don't trust the numbers. I just they can't be that wildly different than what we heard from 4 months ago.
Did you attend the acceptance
I did.
speech? Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Carl.
Well, I have to say I almost totally agree with what was just said about the speech. I mean, Morrissey made these points and this whole thing about the 400 million. I think is just to set the stage for advocating major cost reductions, and we need them, and there's no question we need them, and there's no doubt that the because of their control, the Republican Party now has the responsibility. I mean, it used to be easy to blame the Democrats because they were running everything for decades.
It's always Larry Schultz's fault.
Right, but now they've had, and of course everybody knows I'm no fan of the outgoing Governor Justice, but they've controlled the legislative bodies, and they so I think it was a good speech, and I totally agree with those points about that he's calling for need for spending cuts when we have incredible waste in government structure and spending, and unfortunately the legislature's ability to deal with the system is challenged, and so they need to make it happen, and we may need to pass the constitutional amendments that Justice opposed, and the one that where only Berkeley County supported in terms of education management in West Virginia, which is a major element of state and local government. So I thought the speech was what I expected, and it's first step in the right direction.
Looks like about a 5.5 to 6 on the approval rating in this room. Larry, where are you?
I believe it's ridiculous that we had an outgoing governor saying, $1 billion surplus. We have an incoming governor saying $400 million deficit. We have the legislature saying, oh, no, it's not that bad. We're going to be fine. And not one of them ever publicly talked about the fact that 27% of all the money we spend comes from the federal government that is now being attacked by Elon Musk. How can you not talk about Medicaid? There's not a hospital in this state that doesn't get a significant chunk of money from Medicaid every single year. If we're not going to talk about that, then we're just going to look off into the future and say, oh, well, and without saying this, they say, not counting the big handout we get from the feds every year, why, we're in pretty good shape. We're going to do this and that. They're not talking about the actual budget, which includes over 20% federal money that's under attack right now. And until they start talking about it, I don't care if it's Justice or Morrissey, they're wasting our time. I'm glad I didn't watch the speech.
So you give it a 2, it seems like.
Yeah, going back to one of the central themes was the substance of fluff. And John Gilstrap made the comment that most of them are designed for fluff. Just as much as we criticized him, as much as we enjoyed criticizing him, State of the State speech had a lot of substance to it, much more so than what I saw the other night.
Yeah, this was the governor's first State of the State. If you remember, Big Jim's first State of the State, he sweated a swimming pool around him. His lapels were soaking wet. If you remember the sweat dripping off him during that first State of the State.
But he made a very a point bringing in this platter of cow dung, and that drove the point home that I'm not going to listen to all this BS that's been given.
Well, I think the first one was the charts about the $450 million sick patient. The cow dung came later, didn't it?
Was it? I was thinking it was the first one. You could be right, Rob.
So anyway, let's move on to issue number 3, if that's your final word, Admiral.
That's the final word. Thank you.
Mr. Gilstrap, you're on the clock.
All right. I want to sort of go back, I guess, basically to some of the Doge themes here. As a nation, financially, we're bleeding to death. That's the one constant in the equation. We know that. We cannot sustain the spending patterns that we have had. So how do we fix it? Well, that's a topic for debate. I specifically, though, want to talk about the reductions in force or the offers of buyouts and this sort of thing that seem to have people in high dudgeon. I've spent back when I had real jobs, it was always in the private sector, and downsizing happens all the time. And when I worked for one of the big Waste Management was the name of the company back when it was a big deal. When there were cuts coming, the order was to theoretically fire everybody on your staff, not really, but theoretically, and then hire them back theoretically for how they best serve. And those that once you're hiring them, bring them back to the island, is what the boss would say. Once you put them back on the island, some are going to be left floating, and those are the ones that you get rid of. This isn't the approach you can take with federal government because we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of employees.
2 million.
2 million employees. There's a lot of pearl clutching about the unelected bureaucrats making all of these decisions. Unelected bureaucrats run the government. Back when I was with a lobbying firm, I was not a lobbyist, I was a safety director, but we did a lot of lobbying. We lobbied the unelected bureaucrats because that's where the decisions are made. And if you look at things from Trump's point of view, where his first term was pretty much torpedoed by a lot of ideologue careerists who decided that their approach was more important than their boss's approach. He's going to be bitter, and people are going to get fired. So I don't see why this approach of massive cuts, if only perhaps to selectively hire back later. We don't know what Chapter 2 is. I don't see what's wrong with this. I just throw out. I know that's a question. I throw it out for discussion.
Mr. Schultz, and let's do a minute apiece here in the first go around, so everybody has time.
Sure. Unelected bureaucrats, such as Elon Musk, are generally subject to two things that Mr. Musk is not subject to. An inspector general, who's now been fired from a whole bunch of different agencies, and when they run a big government organization, a Senate confirmation. We're not doing any of that anymore. And why you would think that we're suddenly going to get more efficient if we blow off paying attention to who is in the office and how they're doing their work, I just can't imagine. So I hope for the best, but I do not suspect we're going to see the best.
Mike Carl.
Well, we certainly need to figure out who has both the ability and the motivation to identify waste and problems, and then to somehow enable them. But that's the whole system is a mess and chaotic, the way it is officially structured and the way that it actually operates. And so there's a huge challenge to fixing this thing, and identifying the both the people and the way they ought to be managed, and how they can react to fix all these governmental operations that are creating problems, because and I will acknowledge that they have existed for decades with the support of not only the Democrats but the Republicans. So it's a major challenge.
Mr. Mattson, by phone.
Excuse me. I don't think anybody on this panel, in fact, anybody listening or even in the United States, is going to argue about waste, fraud, and abuse, and we need to find it and get rid of it so we can become more efficient as possible, right? So, but it's how do you go about that, right? So I think the question in regards to Musk is not the fact that he's a great business person or whatever. It's the fact it's how are you going about it? And as Larry said, if you get rid of the inspector generals, what's your motivation there, right? What, don't you want them involved? Don't you want to hire accountants to find those waste, fraud, and abuse and to save taxpayer money? Sure. But then you look at, okay, now you're looking at the IRS. Okay, now you're looking into, now they're talking about going into Social Security. Okay. Well, let's see how it goes down to the military, right? We all heard about the old $50 hammers. So it's how we're going to get back there. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but it's who are you doing to do the job? Who are you hiring to do the job? And yes, there's bureaucracy and get rid of some of the paperwork and red tape and et cetera. Well, that's, that could be done. That's called efficiency. We need to get rid of some of that. But, I just think that no one has an issue about finding it. It's how you're going about it and holding the people accountable who allowed it, right?
Ken?
Everybody, even in this state, we hear, I'm sorry. That,
I got to cut you off here.
Got it.
All right, thank you. Bill, you got the final minutes here, and then it comes back to John for the last minute.
Yeah, as I've said for the last last 2 weeks anyway, I think this is a tug of war in a lot of dimensions between who has control of the executive branch. Does a president with total control or just Congress? This goes back to the late 1880s, 1890s with the Federal Reserve, or with the Government Employee Act. It was manifest again in the 1930s when organizations such as FCC and the Federal Reserve came in. It became particularly apparent after Watergate, where Congress said we cannot trust the executive branch. They took a lot of the powers away from the president after Nixon, and then ever since then there's been an overt effort on the part of the president to claw some of that power of the executive branch back to the president themselves. And this is a manifestation of what we're seeing right now.
Final minute is, I cut you off early if you had another thought.
That's basically my point.
All right, John, we have 2 minutes to wrap it up.
Okay. I want to go back to the unelected bureaucrats. And Larry, all respect, you're wrong. The guys, the experts, the administrators and secretaries who are hired to run any technical department don't know jack about what they're running. I will tell you that the OSHA administrators that I would interact with had no idea about their own body of regulation. They were political appointees. They were approved by Congress. They were the ones who sat there. They depended on their senior career guys who were unfireable in order to bend to their will. That was the level that would get lobbied. That's where policy was made. And it didn't matter. And that's at EPA. I'm going to guess it's at FEMA. I'm going to guess it's at all the different agencies. I don't know why it would be different from one agency to the other. Unelected bureaucrats are the ones that are running this government, and unelected bureaucrats are the ones who are trying to stymie or the potential roadblocks to any of this change because of their parochial interests to protect their fiefdoms within the government, because nobody wants to be unemployed.
So is the answer to fire all of them and replace them with people who voted for Trump?
Not necessarily. Certainly, if I'm president, I'm certainly not going to hire back somebody whose Facebook feed is that I'm a jerk. Why would I do that?
So to replace the all federal workers should pass the Trump loyalty test, no matter what level of federal employee you are.
I don't know what the hierarchy of federal work is, but if you're a decision maker, then yeah, you got to get with the program. You got to.
Last question: if those people were unfireable, how are they getting fired now?
It hasn't gone through the courts yet.
Well, if they're unfireable, they're getting fired now. And with issue number 4, Mr. Larry Schultz.
Yes. Trump has instructed the Department of Justice to drop all charges against corrupt Democratic mayor of D.C., Mr. Adams, Eric Adams.
New York City.
Charges to be dropped without prejudice.
That means what to us non-attorneys?
Yeah. It means that they can be reinstated at any time at Mr. Trump's whim. So if he decides next week that he doesn't like the cooperation on immigration that he's getting from the mayor, all of a sudden the mayor becomes a criminal again. And they go forward with the case. Does the panel, I would also say that in response to this, Antonin Scalia's former law clerk, who was the head of the Southern District of New York federal prosecution team, Ms. Sassoon, resigned, said, I can't file a motion to dismiss this case. I can't do that, even without prejudice. And, of course, they are going to replace her, and they'll keep going down the list like Richard Nixon did until they find someone who's craven enough to do this. The difficulty that I have, and I want to know if anyone else shares these concerns, is this seems like a bit of a hostage crisis for Eric Adams. Which would you rather do? What the president wants you to do, or go to jail? And that's the box they have him in now, which he willingly jumped into because otherwise he's going to jail for sure. I don't think that this, well, let me ask, what do people think about this state of affairs? And is this a proper method of gaining control over the policy issues affecting the wealthiest city in the nation?
Before we do that, the attorneys in the room, when charges are dropped without prejudice, does that like never happen? Is that really unusual?
It's a fairly unusual thing, especially when, and here's the problem, there's a policy thing that Trump wants from him. And that's why this is being done this way.
No,
so they can hold that over his head.
That's facts, not in evidence. But
they're in evidence now.
But the actual the act of having charges dropped. If I had done a bad thing in New York City and the charges were dropped against me, is the assumption that the charges are dropped against me and they will never come up again?
Okay, well, it'll very clearly say in the motion, your lawyer will insist on it, dropped with prejudice. This same set of facts can't be used to charge him again next week. Okay. And they took that out. And the U.S. attorney simply said, I can't do that. Antonin Scalia's former law clerk said, I can't do that. It's too skeevy. She didn't use that word, but that's how I read what she said.
Yeah, she's the one who was involved in putting Sam Bankman-Fried in jail for the crypto king. She's one of yours, Mike. She's a Yalie. She went to
Harvard and Yale.
She went to Harvard undergraduate
Cato
law
Institute
school
as well.
Yeah, and pointed out that the mayor of New York City flew to Florida to meet with the president January the 18th, 2 days before the inauguration, and suddenly the charges are dropped. Mr. Mattson, by phone. You're at a disadvantage as a phoner, so you get to go first.
You kind of beat me to the subject there, Rob. Yeah, if you go down to Mar-a-Lago and you state that you're there talking about the finances of New York, you think you would take your finance chair. But no, you take your campaign manager. So, and then on the same brief that we were just discussing, it says that this decision has nothing to do with the immigration issues in New York. Well, you just said it out loud in writing. So this has a lot of bad looks to it, and anybody who's on the outside, no matter what party you're in, this stinks to high heaven. And it's just really, really bad, and it's so apparent and right in your face that this is what's going down. And for someone to walk around, I'm just surprised that he's still mayor. If you had any sense of honor or ethics to yourself, that you just go, I'm done. But then again, you don't want to go into jail because the evidence that was coming out that this lady who got canned, or resigned, but then it got canned, that they found evidence that the mayor, Democrat mayor, was destroyed evidence. So there are more charges that were getting piled on. So, my thing is, let the court do it. But here it is. We have a quid pro quo, and it's very obvious.
Mr. Carl.
Well, let me say I don't have a problem with the way this has been being handled. I think it's legal, it's legitimate, and there's nothing that I'm aware of in the law that precludes it. The mayor he can appeal. I mean, he can go to get a court to review the disposition of without prejudice part of it. That's always available for anything like this. But I think it's a good move by the Trump area group, and we'll see.
Mr. Schultz. I'm sorry. Yeah. Mr. Stubblefield.
Yeah, the emphasis on the wrong part here. The emphasis we're talking about Eric Adams. It's not Eric Adams. It's Sasson, the attorney, and what she thought was a direct violation of ethicity in legal. And again, you have to look where she's coming from. She's very, very, very conservative. She's supported by the Cato Institute. She has a proven track record of being conservative. So you cannot make the argument that she was doing this in protest on political grounds. She's doing this because she felt there was a clear violation of ethicity in what was being done legally.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Of course, you can say it's for political reasons. She's a young prosecutor in New York City, and that is the launching place. That's where Giuliani launched his career. That's where it's. So whether it's grandstanding or not, I don't know. Again, y'all are able to read minds way, way, way better than I do. As far as the charges being dropped without evidence, without prejudice, it seems to me, to Ken's point, that's a good thing, because if new evidence pops up that says, "Wow, Eric Adams did this really bad thing," well, okay, the charges come right back. I don't understand why that's not exactly the way you would want to have this happen. As far as dropping the charges to begin with, I don't know. I'm going to guess, New York prosecutors, both at the federal and at the state and the city level, have proven themselves to be political beasts. I'm certain that the president has no love lost with any of them. Eric Adams has said from the very beginning, and frankly, so has Donald Trump from back before he was elected, that this case is political in its origins. Suddenly, when Eric Adams stopped towing the line to sanctuary city status, boom, he finds himself facing federal charges of corruption. I don't doubt that there's corruption. He's a politician. That's not the surprise here. But as far as this gets to that confirmation bias loop again, it's not everything is a deep conspiracy. Sometimes things just line up in a way they do, and then it takes prejudiced people to inject the conspiracy juice to make it read differently. So I don't know if this is good or bad, but as far as the without prejudice thing is concerned, I think that's good. It's not a pardon, it's not a prophylactic pardon. It's okay. These charges are dropped, but you behave yourself from now on. That's why I see it.
Mr. Schultz, comes back to you.
Yeah. I'm thinking here as we hear people trying to justify this, that their idea might be a little different if there were a liberal president who was very strong on cleaning up West Virginia's rivers and therefore got a local district attorney, a federal district attorney, to indict the governor, and then said to the governor, "We'll give you a dismissal without prejudice. All you got to do is shut down the damn coal mines." If that's the way we want to run our government, okay, but I think the courts are going to have some things to say about affecting policy by issuing charge dismissals for cases where the guy is guilty.
What do you think the quid pro quo is?
The quid pro quo is Adams gets to stay out of jail if he hands over illegal immigrants and cooperates and doesn't act like a sanctuary mayor.
Right.
Yeah. That's the quid pro quo.
If he follows the law.
Yeah, if he obeys the law.
Right.
Oh, that's...
Well, sometimes the law is a little different in sanctuary cities. Okay. And if he wants to follow the law but not help Trump, they're going to get less people out.
U.S. immigration law is not inapplicable in New York City.
Oh, really? You mean we do have national laws that cover everybody, including the president and the governors and mayors? Wow. Because I've heard a lot today that suggests that it's kind of just all up to Donald Trump. And it's not all up to Donald Trump or Elon Musk. Either one. The courts are going to tell you that.
The courts have the final word.
Yeah.
And I'm very confident in our courts.
Do you know what the original charges on the mayor was? Wasn't it bribery?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Wasn't the public policy, it was just corruption.
No, the public policy is being injected now as a means of letting this criminal walk. It's insane. We don't trade with criminals to do our public policy.
Again, the emphasis should be on the action of Sasson. She's the one that is showing, I think, ethical backbone.
And that's exactly what her campaign literature will say.
Well, hold a second, John. Let's don't speculate
She's
there.
never run
Let's
for
just
office.
take
Everybody's
action.
speculating on everything
No,
else.
No, we're not.
She has
That's what
never
you've been
run
doing.
That's what about is a-
We've been
She's
trying
not
to
an
pull you
elected
back
official.
from your speculations.
I don't know. I like to be consistent. Not always. I'm not perfect, but I like to be consistent. When Bill Clinton met on the runway with who was the Attorney General at that time?
Yeah.
Yellen? No, she was not.
Holder.
No, no, female.
Oh, that was Obama.
It was under Obama. Bill Clinton met on the tarmac, and suddenly there were no charges against Hillary. And he said, nothing that we discussed had anything to do with the charges against my wife. I didn't buy it then, and I don't buy it now that it's a different party just because it's my party. It's just because it's Republican, right? I don't buy it that the Republican president and the mayor of New York City met in Florida for an hour or 2 days before his inauguration
And talked about our grandkids.
and talked about their grandchildren and the economics of New York City. When he didn't bring along with him his economic team, he brought with him his campaign advisor, and then he gets charges dismissed. I'm not buying it. I didn't buy it with Bill Clinton, and I'm not buying it today. But that's me as a mind reader. Now we move on to issue number 5, and for that, Michael Carl.
Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about government inefficiency at all levels, and I'm throwing out the prospect and just asking for thoughts and ideas about how you could set up a financial incentive for a government employee at any level to report and to offer solutions to some of this waste that we're seeing.
All right, start first with Larry. Go ahead.
Sure. I think that would be possible. On the other hand, one of the things we know about all human beings is that a certain portion of them will lie for money. And so if you're going to have to fact test what they say pretty good when they're willing to take cash to make this report. Some of them will be telling the truth, but of course you then would wonder why we got to pay this guy whose job it is to find this waste, fraud, and abuse in order for him to find this waste, fraud, and abuse. And that gets a little circular, it seems to me. The credibility of such a person who's taking essentially a payment for his testimony is always going to be subject to attack. Doesn't mean that attack will be successful. There are expert witnesses who testify all the time, and they're paid, some of them quite handsomely, for their testimony, but it's certainly an area of inquiry. And so if, for example, the witness who's doing this thing and taking money to do it is in dire financial straits, then it makes it a little more likely that he'd be willing to say almost anything in order to get there.
What if the compensation was and you ought to appreciate this system, a percentage of the actual savings that result from the disclosure?
Well, assuming we had a system that's not being run by an unelected, unconfirmed tech billionaire who can't be trusted because he doesn't trust himself to go for confirmation, then maybe you'd have a way of doing it that way.
Bill,
you'd still be wondering, is he doing it because he's got a problem?
Bill, you had a career as a federal employee. What do you got on this?
Yeah, we tend to use the term waste, fraud, and abuse as a single sentence, a single word. I think the fraud should be viewed separately. That is something that can be identified. As far as waste, I have a feeling if Mike Carl and I listed 100 different things, of the 100 things, 50 Mike would say was critical, I would say waste, or more than likely it'd be the other way around, something I'd say critical. I can go through hundreds and hundreds of different things that I think were important. Climate change studies, for an example. Others would say every dollar we spend on climate change is waste. So my point is on this, We cannot use in a single sentence waste, fraud, and abuse. The fraud and possibly the abuse may fall in clearly legalese considerations. The waste is in the eyes of the beholder.
Kenny Madsen, you were in the service. You saw some waste during your time.
Oh yeah. Welcome to the military. There's lots of it. But no, if you find a better, more efficient way of doing things, or you point out things to your management or elected official who's in charge of, or your bureaucrat who's in charge of the department, then I wouldn't say there's some financial stuff, because then what Larry's point is, what's going on here? Is there really something? So there is proof about waste and what another? Maybe just we put waste, we'll put fraud. Then the employee should be recognized, and that could be in many ways. That could be, an award presented by the governor, or something that matter, an extra week vacation, on their own, something like that. But to make a financial thing, we're looking for this, looking for that. I mean, I had one of my clients say, why don't we, give bounties out for people to look for illegals? Okay. I mean, it sounds good, but then you're going to have all these people making all these accusations. Right. So I think, for a person inside government and they find waste, fraud, and abuse and things like that, or a more efficient way, they should be rewarded by the governor or the head of thing for, in other words, an award, and be recognized. That's all.
But those programs have been in effect for many, many, many years. You recognize employees for making more efficient.
John Gilstrap.
I want the bonus for the abandonment of Bagram Air Base and all that stuff left behind. If I can identify the billions of dollars and I get a couple million out of that, is that where we're going here with the?
We did the same thing in Saigon.
I know.
So
the government is built around waste, and it's the nature of the system. It shouldn't be, but it is. I think anytime you start to incentivize people to find the waste and abuse, again, it's so relative, but it's also a matter of saying, the unelected bureaucrats, this is my job. Yes, I am the paperclip wrangler for the Department of Energy. It is the most important paperclip wrangler around. Somebody like Admiral Stubblefield might come up and say, we don't really need a paperclip wrangler. Yes, we absolutely do. So one man's fraud and waste is another man's job. I don't think we can leave that. That's the fox guarding the chicken coop.
Mr. Carl comes back to you.
Well, I appreciate the input but we do need to clearly define any system that would give this compensation, and it has to be not just the vague gray areas that you were talking about. But I think it's worth exploring the concept, and again, it would be a contingent fee on the actual savings of taxpayer money to be realized before the compensation would be paid.
I know how it could work. Actually, I think, just thinking out loud here, if at the GS 12 level, 14 level, if John, here's your program. These are your objectives. Boom, boom, boom. Whatever they are. This is your budget. If you can achieve all of these objectives at the highest level, however we're going to measure that, and you've still got whatever amount of budget you've got left, in there is a number that can somehow be part of a compensation package.
Yeah, if I may, what's been proposed now is valid. There's no question. But it's been done over and over and over and over again. It's nothing new about it.
In government?
Yeah, in government, all the time, John, all the time. At every levels of government, they've been looking for efficiencies. But now what has been done currently under the Doge is an order of magnitude different than what we're talking about, what Mike Carl's proposed. What Mike's saying is great, but again, there's nothing unique about it. It's been done. What is being looked at by Musk is something totally different that we have not done before.
In my limited experience, just being married to a federal employee, all of these ideas are really fascinating, with the exception of one thing you're all leaving out. So much of what is being done that you're referring to as waste, fraud, and abuse is in there because somebody elected to Congress or the U.S. Senate made it into there. And when you try to cut it out and it offends the wrong chairperson or committee member, it gets put back in. And until you get around that, you get the sledgehammer that Musk is wielding right now.
We have I haven't checked up on this in a while, entire weapons platforms that are no longer useful, that are continuing to be developed because it's in an influential
Congressional.
Congressional, exactly right,
I mean,
John. You're
that's
exactly right.
billions of dollars.
Start there.
Yeah.
Right? How do you get around that one, Mike Carl?
Brack.
I think there's enough actual waste that is not a function
We gotta
of
go.
legislation.
All right. Final thoughts. 8 seconds apiece next. We start on the phone with Ken Matson. Kenny, go.
Happy wife, happy life. Have a happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Schultz.
Happy Valentine's Day. It's also the beginning of skunk mating season. Drive carefully.
Mr. Stubblefield.
I'm not going to pair the two. You own your own.
Mr. Carl.
Our Commanders are only one of 3 teams to beat the world champion Eagles.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Everybody have a good weekend. Happy Valentine's Day, Tony.
To wrap up the
And
show,
skunk day.
I say this. I swear no allegiance or loyalty to a president or a king. I swear to the Constitution of the United States of America.
You're in the minority now, Rob.
That's not true.